Hi, and welcome to Leaders of the Jewel City. I'm Rich Wells, the Public Information Officer for the City of Glendale. Leaders of the Jewel City gives you an inside look into the decisions that help shape our city through the eyes of former mayors. In the coming months, we'll talk with these former city leaders about issues and projects they worked on during their terms in office. Our guest this month is Eileen Givens, who served on the City Council from 1991 to 1999, and who held the position of mayor from April of 1994 to 95 and April of 1998 to 1999. We recently caught up with Eileen at her home in Glendale. Eileen, first of all, talk about the makeup of the different councils that you sat with.
Yeah, during my 8 years on City Council, I actually served with 8 different people. When I was first elected, I got the veterans. I was the only rookie. I served with Carl Raggio, Ginger Bramberg, Larry Zarian, and Dick Jutra. And then gradually, as they went off the council, new people were elected: Sheldon Baker, Marianne Plumley, Rick Reyes, and Dave Weaver. So it was quite a variety during the whole time, an interesting mix of personalities, of opinions, styles, and but we learned to get along, despite the differences.
Now, at the time, Dave Ramsey was city manager when you started, correct?
That's right. That's right. He was city manager the first about 6 years that I was there, and then he left, and we hired Jim Starbird. Interestingly, the two city managers had very different styles, really, different personalities, and I like them both. They both were really good city managers, I think. Good people. They both were really oriented towards service. They got along with people, and they set goals, encouraged us to set long-range goals. They had the interests of the city at heart. They both had good senses of humor, which is pretty important in a city manager. They were usually pretty patient, more patient than I probably could have been in their job. Huge responsibilities. They were well liked by their peers and respected by their peers. Different styles, and I think each served the city well during the time frame.
You got to do something very unique, and that was you had an opportunity to select the city manager. Of course, that was Jim Starbird. Right. We talked to Sheldon Baker about that. What was your take on the hiring process?
Well, I thought it was an interesting process. I think it worked very well. Obviously, a great result being able to hire Jim. We hired an independent search firm to lead the process. They did a nationwide search. They did some of the preliminary screening, paper screening, and interviews, brought us a short list of candidates, and Jim Starbird was, of course, on that. We then interviewed and really were very, very impressed by Jim Starbird. We worked with the city attorney on contract terms. We then negotiated with Jim over the telephone. Larry Zarian and I did that, and that was a moment to remember. Jim's a tough negotiator, but I think we really, I know we were all unanimously enthusiastic about Jim Starbird as city manager, and he's, I think, proven to be a good choice. He's excellent, excellent.
Talk, if you will, about the community at the time you were in office, Eileen.
Yeah, during the 90s, I think Glendale was going through a period of transition. A lot of things that happened the 70s and 80s, sort of changing the style, the face of Glendale, and especially in the 90s, it began to, I think the pace began to accelerate. We had moved from a single-family home bedroom community. Really, we're moving into becoming more of a cosmopolitan urban center, and whether you liked it or not, that's what was happening. We were trying hard to retain that small town feeling, but the fact is we were becoming very urban. And so there were underlying pressures, I think, and some tensions with that. The demographics of the city changed. We became much more diverse. There was more traffic. There were more apartments than there were single-family homes, more people living in apartments than in single-family homes. So a lot of interesting changes, and I think the real challenge for the community as a whole, and especially for the council then, was how in the world do you deal with those challenges, and how do you make the best of a changing situation?
Were those some of the most difficult challenges you faced? The changing demographics, the increase in the population, that type thing?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of things centered around the key question of how to manage growth and how to get balanced growth in the city. And so a lot of the issues that we dealt with had to do with that. Another issue, of course, is always budget. There's never enough money to go around, and there were some years when the budget was particularly tight as state funding changed. But we managed our way through that and hopefully kept our eye on the long-term picture and what would be good for Glendale, not only right at that moment in time, but down the road a piece.
How did you deal with some of those issues, Eileen?
Carefully, very carefully. My colleagues will tell you with too many study sessions. I never could get enough study sessions. To me, a study session was a good way to get more in-depth chance to discuss the issues that were before us. So I liked the study sessions where we got a more careful analysis, more detailed analysis from staff or from consultants about the issues. And that helped, I think, then us focus our attention as the issue then came to the more formal council meeting. I think a good example, or some examples of those challenges and trying to deal with them, was our whole effort towards long-range planning. Everything from the Hillside Ordinance, which we passed in, I think it was 1993, at its time was a very strict Hillside Ordinance for communities like us. Quite controversial. We involved a lot of people in the process, came up with a plan an ordinance that I think both work to preserve the remaining hillsides as well as respect the rights of property owners. Controversial, but I think a good first step and pretty strict for its time. We also, during that time, started a downtown strategic plan, and that was an effort to do comprehensive planning for the greater downtown area, rather than just letting change happen in a topsy-turvy sort of way. We tried to have a plan. Again, a long process, involved hundreds of community members, other people in the process, to figure out what would be best for Glendale, how to get that mix that we wanted of retail, housing, entertainment, different flavors, different opportunities downtown. A piece of that, of course, was the town center, what was then called the town center. We worked hard to dedicate an area in the planning that would be set aside for this mixed use and include a park that has eventually evolved into what today is the Americana. But the beginning of it was what we call the town center. Another piece of that planning effort was the Alux Theater. In 1991, the city bought the Alux Theater and has invested over $6 million towards its restoration, knowing that the theater could become a catalyst for the whole downtown area and draw people there, and while they were there, before or after, they often would stop and shop or have dinner or something. So those kind of planning efforts, I think, were important during that time as we tried to manage and balance the growth that was going on in the city.
You mentioned something interesting there too, was the long-range planning process, Glendale 2010. Talk a little bit about that.
Again, we tried to look beyond, this was now in 1995, 96, that era. We were trying to look 10 years out at least, or more than that, and think about what kind of a community did we want to have then. And nobody had a crystal ball, there were no magic absolute right answers, but we involved citizens, business owners, leaders from different homeowner associations, anyone who would agree to be involved. We tried to drag them into the process and talk about what was going to be important to Glendale in 2010 and how can we make sure that it happened that way.
As part of the overall strategic plan, I know you did focus on increasing parks in the community. Can you address that, Eileen?
Yeah, as I had said, the effort was to do balanced growth and planning that was balanced. And so we had some new office buildings, we had some new retail centers, we worked on infrastructure, we worked on comprehensive planning, but a key part of that was to get more park space for the city. The community had grown, we hadn't been able to develop parks maybe as quickly as we could have or should have years past, so we tried to accomplish that during the 90s. And we were able to acquire some land, which became Dugmagian Wilderness Park. We created a couple of new mini parks, just neighborhood pocket parks, and we built the Freeway Sports Park, sports complex, which I think has over 90 acres of playing fields. up off the 2 freeways. So again, not enough, but a lot better than we had been to start with, and I think showing the importance, the value the council placed on having recreational areas and recreational space, parks, for our residents.
What were some of the more significant events that occurred while you were in office, Eileen?
Well, there are a lot of good things. We've talked about a lot of those, and a lot that I didn't even mention. I mean, we did start, for instance, the second redevelopment project area along San Fernando Road.
Right.
To take care of some blight, hopefully, and improve infrastructure, do some other changes there. And as a piece of that, we've got some exciting new development there. DreamWorks, Disney, KABC 7, the TV station, all have come aboard and been, connected with that area. We have the Marketplace project developed when I was on council. The public garages, public parking garages. By the Marketplace Library and by the Alux Theater up on Orange Street. Both, I think, really served a need. The train station was restored, renovated, the historic train station. A lot of good things happened. Unfortunately, there were some bad things. The earthquake in 1994, January, was scary, just in a word, was scary.
Right.
But it was good to see how remarkably well the city's Emergency Operations Center worked at that time. The city staff had been planning for emergencies or preparing for emergencies, but you never know until something like that happens, and it worked remarkably well, really did, and so that was good. We had a couple of bad incidents. 2 of our firefighters were badly burned in the Malibu Fires, and that was a horrible time, but it was, again, wonderful the way the community came together, supported the firefighters and their families and the department, and really we wore buttons with Bill Jensen's face on them, remember, and to show that the unity and how much we were thinking of him and his family. And then we also had a police officer, Charles Lazaretto, who was killed in the line of duty, only the 4th officer to be killed in the line of duty in Glendale's history. 4 too many. Terribly tragic. An outstanding young officer, young family, very, very well respected, well liked person. But a good thing, if there can be, was how the community came together. And again, just the outpouring of support for the family, for the police department, for all of us who knew him. I still remember the lines of people for the funeral procession. Can't do that one either. It was a very emotional time, obviously. Still is. Very emotional. But the sense, that's where I think Glendale really shows that even though we're a big city, we really do have those small towns.
Small town feel.
Small town feeling.
Because everybody came out to support him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's remarkable.
And Anne Marie, if you'd come up here for one moment. I have some checks here which represents how the community feels about you and about Chuck, and it's slightly over $170,000, and I'd like to present that to you at this time.
What was one of the most difficult decisions you think you had to make while you were in office, Eileen?
It happened every week, Rich. There were no slam dunks. It was every week. It seemed like there was something that was tough. I can't single out any one decision. It was something that was just a difficult process the whole time, which was part of the challenge of the job. And I learned real quickly that there are more than 2 sides to most stories, and it was really hard to evaluate the facts objectively and try to work through to get to an answer that where you had conflicting opinions and competing needs, to work through to an answer that would be best for the whole city, not one person, not one segment, but for what was going to be best for the community. And those kinds of decisions are tough.
Let's go to the other side of the spectrum. What do you believe were some of the more notable accomplishments of you and your council members?
I think we accomplished a lot during the time I was on in the 90s. The first thing we accomplished was learning how to work together, and that's hard. It is, some days went better than others, obviously, and some moments in time went better, but you have to learn that it's 5 people on a city council, takes 3 votes, at least 3 votes to get things passed. and you have to learn to reach consensus somehow. And I think we were generally pretty successful with that. Some of my favorite accomplishments, I guess, during the two terms that I was on, certainly televising meetings and moving the meetings till nighttime. When I was elected in 1991, the city council meetings were held weekly at 2 p.m. on Tuesdays.
Right.
And it may have worked well in the past, but in the 1990s, I just didn't see how that made any sense. So I started digging in my heels and trying to convince people that we ought to get them on television and move them. It was a surprisingly difficult battle. I couldn't convince my colleagues to start with. We eventually got some staff reports that showed what other cities were doing, LA County cities comparable, and we were clearly behind the times. We got some more studies that showed the costs weren't as high as we had feared, and so gradually the sentiment changed, and we started televising meetings in February 1995. And a month later, we voted to move the meetings to nighttime. So all of a sudden it happened, and I was delighted. And from that, as you know, obviously, we've really been able to use television to help keep people informed and involved in city government, to get them connected, to feel more connected, so they see there are real people in local government that they can talk to and who will listen to them. We did more TV programming, shamelessly, I guess, trying to get people to feel that connection. There was a program that was called Focus on Glendale, where council members took turns touring different city divisions and departments. I got to go out to parks and to libraries, integrated ways, had some great times, learned a lot myself, and had a lot of people tell me, oh my gosh, I saw the show, I didn't know, such and such, and really enjoyed it. There was a Speaking of Glendale program where we, again, had different community leaders come in and talk about different issues and discuss them back and forth, and that was a good experience. One of my favorites was the Out and About Glendale, which I got to host, and I would take the camera guy, the cool camera guy, as I refer to him. That's not his official title, I guess, is it, Tor? But at any rate, we got to go out and go around the city, and I just stopped people on the street and talk to them and ask them what they thought of the city, what they liked, what they didn't like, what changes they'd like to make, etc. It was fascinating. I loved it, and you never knew where I'd show up. Exchange and Montrose on the Beeline, whatever, and great fun. And all of that, again, I think helped show people that the Glendale government was accessible and open. We also started a City Hall in Your Neighborhood program, which was not televised. I guess take it back.
Later
I guess
on
it
we
was.
did.
Later on we did.
That's right.
That's right. We finally dragged those camera people out. But the idea, again, was to move City Hall out into the neighborhoods, literally. A lot of people can't make it to council meetings, regardless of what time of day or evening they're on. So we would go out to the neighborhoods. There were no speeches, no agendas. People could just bring up issues, talk about whatever they wanted, ask us questions. Usually the whole council was able to go. A lot of city staff was able to go. And again, it was a great way to have a dialogue about the community, with the community.
It really opened up the two-way communication between the community and the City Hall, didn't it?
I think so. I think it really did. And so I think that was a really good thing that we accomplished then. And a lot of other good things were happening. I'm proud of what the community did, how it came together to fight hate crimes. We had a couple of hate crime incidents that came to our attention during my first term as mayor, early on in that term, and I appointed a Blue Ribbon Task Force on hate crimes. It made some recommendations back to the council, which the council wholeheartedly endorsed, and we got some programs going that I think were pretty remarkable for that time, and thanks to the community for pitching in. The task force evolved into a Glendale Community Relations Coalition. We formed a hate crime response team, so if there was a hate crime incident, the community could quickly get involved and maybe send letters of support to the victims. In many cases would go out and actually help paint out graffiti if it was a graffiti type of incident. We joined a countywide coalition on hate crimes. We hosted a countywide hate crime summit in Glendale, which got us some attention. We started the community forums that were actually small group discussions in people's homes, residents' homes throughout the city, The theme was understanding who we are the first year, I think. And we had diverse groups, and they were able to talk in a small group setting about issues that were bothering them or that concerned them or that interested them, and really brought people together. We hosted a art show, student art show once a year. Again, we may speak different languages, but art's a good way of uniting people, and did that. So a lot of things, and in 1996, we got a very prestigious award from the LA County Board of Supervisors for our work as a Community Relations Coalition. So I'm proud of that. I think we did a good job, and the community came together and did a good job.
That was quite a diverse group that you put together on that initial Blue Ribbon Committee, wasn't it?
It was. I was really pleased that these people agreed to join, people from different kinds of businesses, different religious groups, different community organizations, different ethnic backgrounds, and really blue ribbon people putting their heads together and unified and agreeing that the important thing was to get out the message that Glendale would have zero tolerance for hate crimes. And I think we got that message across.
Is there anything that, now looking back, is there anything that you feel you didn't quite accomplish what you wanted to? Maybe there was something not quite finished.
Oh, lots. I mean, that's the story of life, right? Government goes on and on and on. Government continues, government keeps going, and the council members come and go. You know, we're there for a certain period of time, and we leave for whatever reasons, and government continues. So, of course, there are lots of things that I hated to leave. I would love to have been able to stay on and see the downtown strategic plan and the town center plan continue, for instance, and be there for all that process with getting to the Americana and some of those other developments with that. More school city projects. I would like to have tried to help spearhead some of those, like we did with Edison Pacific, the park, community center, library, etc. I would love to have had more chance to keep going with the youth coalition that we were able to start, and the youth summit. Just so many things. Of course, that's always true. But you know, there's a time to be on council. There's a time to leave, and it's healthy for a city to have new people come aboard and pick up the ball and keep it rolling.
If you had a chance to go back and change anything, what might that be?
I think I might get rid of the pigeon problem. I think I might like to not have to go through that experience again. I don't know if you were around during the pigeon problem, but businesses had been complaining about the mess that pigeons were making in downtown Glendale. Now, some people would have thought there were a lot of other important things to deal with, but this was important, and so we listened. And we had staff explore some options. They came up, they talked to the county. The county said, oh, we can get rid of pigeons for you. And so I think it was about the first week after I was first elected mayor, the council voted to adopt the county plan, only to find out 48 hours later that the plan wasn't nearly as humane as we had been told. So I started getting faxes practically hourly in my office from animal rights activists from across the whole United States. We got letters, we got emails, I got recipes for pigeon stew, I had all kinds of magic solutions being proposed. Somebody wanted me to feed birth control pills to the pigeons, by myself, I guess. And I mean, it was bizarre, it was awful. The feathers all hit the fan, so to speak, just like I say, about 3 weeks after I was mayor. So, and even when I retired, I still got some pigeon-related gag gifts, so I could have lived without that.
What were some of the more humorous things that took place while you were in office, Eileen?
Oh, we had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun being on council. I'm not sure what was funny and what was just plain fun. A lot of fun times. Everything from soccer balls, kicking soccer balls down the middle of the street.
Right.
I get my kicks in Glendale. It was that relay that we did, and it was great fun. Several of us fell down and got injured, but other than that, it was great fun. I liked everything. I loved going into the classrooms and reading to kids or having them ask me questions. They didn't really want to know much about city government. They wanted to know which McDonald's I ate lunch at when I was a kid, you know, and this kind of thing. So, what kind of car, what kind of a limousine I had, and of course I did not. Snow day at Brand Park was always fun. We had sled races. A council member and a youngster up at the park we'd have races down the hill, and that was fun. Just the list just goes on and on. I got to test drive an electric car when those were brand new, and that was kind of fun when the dump truck driver next to me on Glendale Avenue thought he was faster than I was, and he wasn't. Maybe we better not tell that story. Right? Lots of fun things. And then, there were some, I guess they were humorous incidents surrounding the fact that I was a woman mayor. Glendale has only elected 3 women mayors in 102 years, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it's been. And sometimes in going to a conference or a meeting or an event, if my husband was with me and if all the name tag said was Mayor Gibbons, someone would automatically hand it to Jim.
Oh, really?
And I tried to think that was funny. I was kind of annoyed at times, but it was kind of funny. And in fact, one year when the first time I was mayor, I got to ride on the Rose float in the parade, and Jim had bought a seat that was being auctioned off. And as we passed the corner where the TV cameras are, we could hear a TV commentator say, "Oh, and here comes the city of Glendale's magnificent float. It's called Team Spirit, and it's a raft, and they're all rowing. Look at them rowing. Wave to us. The mayor's on board. Wave to us, Mr. Mayor." So Jim, who's sitting right one seat below me, raises his hand and smiles and waves for the cameras. He's not heard the end of that story yet. So, anyway, lots of funny things happen.
Well, that actually brings up an interesting point. Now, you were the 3rd woman to serve on the Glendale City Council,
Yeah,
is that
I was.
correct?
That's right.
In the history of the city.
That's right.
Talk about that. I imagine there were some challenges for you.
There were. The first challenge was getting elected, because after all, the Glendale City Council, 5 members, already had 1 woman on it, Ginger Bremberg. So when I was running, in fact, there were 3 women running that year in 1991, and I would have people tell me with a straight face, "Well, no, I'm not going to vote for you, honey, because we already have a woman on the city council. Ginger's there." And I'd say, "Well, but we could probably have 2." And others would say, "Well, I think your answer sounded good, Eileen, at a forum, but, I've already committed to another woman, and
So they could only vote for 1 woman.
Yeah. But they got over that, I think, most of them, and obviously they did because I won, and so,
right.
that was pretty good. A pretty good proof, I think, that the community really could think beyond that. And I think the challenge always, when you're, in a minority position like that, is to show that you are equal to the others, that you can, in fact, do the job. And the gender doesn't have anything to do with your ability to do the job. It's more about your experience, your training, your character, your personality, your style, whatever. But it isn't a gender thing. Women can be city council members and mayors just as well as men can be city council members and mayor. You just have to get the right people in the job, and I think that's what happens. And unfortunately, only 1 more woman has been elected to city council. Mary Ann Plumley was elected a few years after I was, but now there have only been 4 of us. And so I hope in the future there will be some qualified women who run and are elected.
I'd like to focus on one of those women you mentioned, Eileen, and that is Ginger Bremberg. Ginger was a very influential person in this community.
Absolutely.
You were very good friends with Ginger, and I know you had a great deal of respect for her. Talk about her and your time on the council with Ginger.
It was great. Ginger was an amazing person. I had known Ginger through community activities for some time, and in fact, when I first was thinking about running, Do I Dare, she was very outspoken and direct in her comments to me, and absolutely was supportive of the effort, which I thought was great. And so after I was elected, Ginger really took me by the hand and was my mentor. She introduced me to people at League of California Cities meetings or even around City Hall. She knew the names of every single city employee. I think she really did. And they loved her for it. Absolutely. Who wouldn't? And she knew the issues. She was an expert on so many things. She really was. Integrated waste was always her specialty, and garbage. She wore the garbage can around her neck, as you may remember, and she was proud of it. So many areas where she knew so much. She had a wealth of information, great knowledge, quick brain, a quick wit. She was fearless. She was never afraid to ask anyone a question and just really jump on them if they didn't have a good answer and an accurate answer. She and I kind of had the war of Post-its. Staff used to get a little bit amused by us, I think. We each would, as we would read stuff, we would write notes on Post-its and then mark all of our pages of the reports with Post-its. And we used to have, I guess, a contest kind of subconsciously about who could have the most Post-its. And we also both loved to edit. And so if staff reports came through with errors in them, woe be unto that staff member.
Red pencil came out.
Red pencil, and you probably got questioned at the mic about it, or it was called to somebody's attention. Ginger and I were kind of two peas in a pod on that. And so it was really a tremendous opportunity to work with her. I think it surprised both of us, though, to find out we didn't always agree on the issues, because we had been friends and we had known each other and we'd been in some of the same organizations together. But we were different people. You know, we just were. And so we, I think, surprised each other. I think it especially surprised her maybe to find out that I didn't always vote the same way she did. And we had to learn to talk that through, and sometimes she'd be annoyed with me and sometimes I would be annoyed with her. But what was neat was that we could get past that and you know, still be friends, and we could still disagree on the issue. And admittedly, sometimes we liked to make fun of the boys who were on city council because we were the only two girls on city council, so we had some fun with that too. And she was a great friend, personally, and for the community, what a remarkable person and a resource person and a friend and a patriot and a fighter for the citizens. She just really was. I can't say enough good things about what she did for the community, the devotion, the commitment, the dedication to the community for all those years. And of course, then she left council. She retired, only to come back again, you know, 4 years later and get elected again and still be just as energetic and feisty as ever. It was great.
Eileen, I know you've remained very active in the community. Talk about what you're doing today.
Well, since council, it's a tough thing going off all at once. You just kind of go cold turkey off. I've told people for years that I'm a recovering politician, and they seem to be amused by that. But I think the truth of the matter is that it's incurable. Once it's in your blood, it's kind of always there. And I've been a lifelong volunteer, so I've gone back to that. I've been on the board of directors of the Alux Theater, the Friends of the Library Board. I spent a couple of years chairing the city's charter revision committee. In 2003 to 2005, we made recommendations to the city council for 21 amendments to the city charter, and they all passed in April 2005, so we were delighted with that effort, and that took a lot of work. And I've done some other volunteer work. I recently co-emceed a fundraiser for the Glendale Educational Foundation, for instance. And I've got my fingers in things, but I'm also doing what I said I would do when I left office, which is spend more time with my family. That's a big time commitment, and most of it's a good time. You know, I get to see family members and grandkids and all that. I've been traveling, and had some good adventures traveling, and just trying to get my life back in balance a little bit more than when it was on city council. Eileen,
what would you like to be remembered for?
First of all, I think I'd just like to be remembered, preferably positively. You know, I don't know, Rich. I think I'd like to be remembered as someone who was honest, fair, who worked hard, who really cared about people and about the city, somebody who could bring people together, build consensus, who was accessible, who was a real person, not a slick politician, but a real person. And so it's just nice to be remembered.
Eileen, I'd like to thank you and Jim for inviting us into your home today and sharing some of your memories with us of your time in office. I know I've remembered a few things here that I had forgotten. And again, thank you very much for joining us today.
You're welcome. It's been great fun. Thanks.